agenda, we need to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. So Councilman Reports, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Reports. All right. Looks like the first order of business is adoption of resolution LSCFD 2102. Presenter is Mr. Estes. You have a presentation, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, Mayor. And actually, if we could get, Terry, could you do a quick roll call just so we have that on the record?
Sure.
So we.
Mayor Schoaf,
Here.
Vice Mayor Faith,
Here.
Councilmember Romack,
Here.
Councilmember Donahue,
Here.
Councilmember Rostosi,
Here.
Councilmember Claire,
Here.
Councilmember Brainerd Watson.
All right, thank you. I just want to be doubly sure with this because we're doing this for the first time with the CFD and don't want anybody coming back and saying we didn't do anything appropriately. So Mayor and Council, what we have for you tonight, as you are acting in your capacity as board members of the Litchfield Square Community Facilities District, is the discussion and possible action to adopt resolution 21-02, which is a resolution that does a number of things. It provides for the organization of the district, approves the general plan for the district, and calls for an election with respect to the issuance of bonds and the levying of an ad valorem property tax. So as you can see from, if you've had a chance to read through the resolution, it just starts off with certain findings with regards to the formation of the district, and then it also provides for the district officers to be designated as the mayor and the vice mayor are appointed as chairperson and vice chairperson respectively, and that the other members of the council are appointed as district board members, that the city clerk is appointed as a district clerk. The city treasurer is appointed as a district treasurer, the city manager is the district manager, and the city attorney as a district counsel, and the city engineer as a district engineer. So essentially everybody's playing their same roles that they have with the city will be their roles with this community facilities district. It then also authorizes the calling of the election. And I think we've talked about this before, but there has to be an election of the property owners and the anyone who lives within the district who's a registered voter to be able to establish the bonding capacity, the amount of bonds that the CFD, the district, can issue. And as we know that the city is the sole owner of all the property within the district, so there are no individuals who are registered to vote, who are qualified electorates within the district. We're essentially calling for an election for the city to cast a vote as to what is going to be set as the bond value and the ad valorem tax value for the district. And we'll be addressing that through a resolution in the regular council meeting, with the council appointing Matthew as the city manager as the city's designated individual to cast that ballot on behalf of the city. So that's essentially the the process, we have to treat it just like we would treat it any other election. So we actually have to do all the publication. We have to set up a ballot voting location, everything just like we would do with any other type of election. We have to have a polling place. And there's a number of things that we have to comply with on that. Are there any questions with regard to this resolution?
Questions from council? Looks like I don't see any questions. Given that there's no questions, is there a motion to adopt resolution 21-02, taking certain actions with regard to organization of the district, approving the general plan of the district, and calling for an election with respect to issuance of bonds by the district and the levy of an ad valorem property tax?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second, moved by Councilman Stossy, seconded by Councilman Clare. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Was that an opposed, Vice Mayor Faith, or just a late hand coming back?
That was a late hand coming back.
Okay, so the motion carries 6-0. Do we need anything further, Mr. Estes, before we adjourn?
No, Mayor, that is all we have for this CFD agenda.
Is there a motion to adjourn the CFD Community Facilities District Board?
So move.
Seconded by Councilman Clare. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. The regular meeting was noticed to follow this meeting as soon as it was finished. So unless someone wants to take a break, we'll go ahead and continue right on into the regular council meeting. Anyone need a break? All right, then I'm going to call the, hopefully you can hear that. That was my gavel. Call the meeting to order. It says we have another Pledge of Allegiance, but we already did a Pledge of Allegiance, so that should be sufficient. Mr. Estes, yes?
That's correct. You're more than welcome to do that.
Okay, then we'll start with Councilman Reports. Councilman Romack.
Oh, I want to, this is good. I want to thank or acknowledge Tricia Kramer for having a parade to enjoy my Corvette. Other than that, I don't have anything.
I was a little disappointed your Corvette wasn't the very first thing in the parade.
Well, you got to go first. Don't give me that.
But see, I thought maybe you'd loan it to me and I could drive it first. Be perfect. All right. Any other report? Councilman Romack.
I just talked to you.
Okay. Councilman Donahue.
Actually, I had the honor of riding in a red version of John Romack's Corvette, which was awesome, except when we got done and I had to have a lady with her children help me get out. It was like way down there. Holy moly. Anyway, I actually also really enjoyed all of the holiday things we've done. We did the dinner with the employees and the luncheon. It's always awesome to see everybody. And then I really enjoyed with Mayor and Vice Mayor and a couple others walking through the tombs. I don't know what it is, but in the basement of what's going to be city center. That was pretty cool. We signed a piece of cement. If in the 1,000 years they dig it up, you'll see our names. Anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Clare.
Couple things. One, the parade was great. It was great to see the turnout and how many people were involved. And I thought Tricia and the whole team did a great job with that. Secondarily, was able to participate in a golf tournament for the Southwest Valley Chamber, which I'm the city representative at. And we had over 100 players there. And it's just a completely different energy going on with the chamber right now. And it's just really good to see how things have turned around there. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilman Stossy.
I would just echo kudos to Trish. The parade was awesome. It was my first year getting to do it, and it was super fun. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Faith.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the staff always does a great job with the parade. It's another year well done. I just want to give my condolences to Mayor Lord's family and all of her friends and city staff. She did a fantastic job and put a great face on the city of Goodyear for many, many years. So the loss of Georgia is a loss to the West Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I would echo your sentiments about Mayor Lord. She was quite a lady, and I use the word lady as exactly the term that describes her. She had grace that is missing in a lot of individuals these days, particularly in political office. So we're all going to miss Mayor Lord. I also join in with the thanks to Tricia. Tricia and the staff did a great job with all of the holiday events that we had. It was fun with the staff for the holiday luncheon, and it was always, as always, it was fun with the parade. So with that, we'll go on to the city manager report on current events.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have, of course, the report in your packet, and I'll just hit on my few highlighted items. One, for winter basketball this year, we had 389 registrants. That's the highest year we've had since 2017, when we had 358 kids. So that's great to be up more than then, especially with COVID still going on. As you know, we did begin construction this week last week on the roundabout. If you've seen the pilings of millings, they've begun digging up Litchfield Road, and of course, traffic is already starting to back up on the old Litchfield Road, but that's going to happen, but they are working on it. Again, the roundabout project will run until roughly October of 2022. So it's going to be almost a year of seeing that roundabout get built. Staff is working on changing the city website from litchfield-park.org over to lpaz.gov. We have requested to get that domain name. We're waiting to hear back if we get it or not. If so, we'll be making that transition, because most cities are a .gov, not a .org, and we get rid of the dash. Anyway, working on that. Staff met to discuss the area between Scout Park and the underpass about making that a park area. Obviously not a park area with athletic fields, but some shade trees, some benches, maybe some ramadas, that sort of thing. Kind of be a buffer between the businesses in Litchfield Square and the homes in the area fairway. So we're working on that project. That's going to be an important balance there in a small area, and we look forward to seeing what comes of that. We have a marketing committee now that's working on the city's marketing efforts, including social media, website updates, business cards, changing how we market our events somewhat to more digital ads and versus less print ads, other things. So we've got a lot of good marketing changes to make, and I think those are good things for us to do for the city in general and for our events. That was all the highlights I had. As always, I welcome any questions you may have.
Any questions from council? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Matthew, could you expand a little bit in your report about using something called grass block at Camelback Park?
Yes, sir. Vice Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm actually going to refer that question to Woody, sir. I know what it's about, but Woody can explain it better than me. Woody, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor. Grass block is a grid-shaped concrete block that has openings of maybe about 3 or 4 inches, and then a web of concrete. And the idea is that you put that down and then grow grass in those openings within the grid. And then it becomes a drivable surface. So you're instead of putting down asphalt, you're putting down something that would be something that looks more like it belongs in a park, but it's still a drivable, parkable surface. So we're going to explore that a little bit and see if we think it makes sense for this park, and maybe even try a little mock-up of it and see how that works. But the idea is to, obviously reduce the amount of asphalt and still have kind of a green atmosphere for the park.
Thank you.
Thank you, Woody.
Any other questions for the city manager? Excuse me. All right, then we'll move on. This is the time for a response to last meeting's call to the community. There were no requests to speak by the community, so there's no response. Mr. Clerk, City Clerk, do we have any requests to speak this evening?
We do not, Mayor.
All right, so then we'll move on to the presentation section. The first item is the audit report. Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Tonight, we actually have Steve Palmer with our audit firm, and he's going to, he has a presentation and will give an update on the audit. I think you might be muted, Steve.
There we go. I couldn't find the button for just a minute. I apologize. Good evening. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening to report on the results of the recent audit, which we are just completing. We actually just got the last piece of information we needed from the state this afternoon or this morning to complete the financial statements. So I'm pleased to report that we will easily have them completed by December 31st, which is the date they're required to be submitted to the GFOA for the award that the city submits for each year. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So if I can share my screen here. Okay, can you see that screen okay?
Yes.
Very good. So first of all, I would like to point out that, as I mentioned a moment ago, the city did submit their financial statements to the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, for their review. And based on their review, the city received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And that's a great accomplishment of the finance department of the city. The GFOA recognizes the good work that they're doing in their financial reporting. And the city will be submitting again for this award for the fiscal year 2021 audit. So let's talk about the results of our audit. As part of our audit, in addition to the financial statements, we submit 3 separate reports which communicate our opinion on the financial statements. The first is the independent auditor's report. And here is where we, in essence, give the city their grade, whether or not they passed the audit. And I'm pleased to report that we issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which means that in our opinion, the financial statements presents fairly the city's financial position and the results of their operations for the year ended June 30, 2021. That's exactly the opinion that you would want. The second report that we issued is a report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. And here there are several different levels of findings that we could potentially issue depending on what we find. And I'm very pleased to report that we did not issue any findings in this report. No material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or compliance items. The third report that we issue is on the city's compliance with state legal requirements, things such as expending highway user revenue fund monies and other state legal compliance requirements. And I'm pleased to report that we did not note any exceptions in this area either. Let's take just a brief look at the city's finances. The total net position of this city at the end of the year was about 36.5 million. That means if you were to take all the city's assets, subtract the liabilities, that residual amount is the equity, about 36.5 million. And over time, whether or not this number increases or decreases is an indication as to whether or not the financial position, the financial health of the city is improving or deteriorating. So let's take a look. For fiscal year 2021, the net position of the city increased by about 4.3 million. Positive trend. Let's look at the capital asset activity of the city. There was quite a bit going on. Capital assets increased by a net amount of about 1.2 million, with about $2.3 million of additions, disposals of 47,000, and the city also reported a little million in depreciation expense. Some of the significant additions to the city's capital assets were for the city center project and the perimeter wall projects. That was about $1.5 million that was expended in fiscal year 21. Excuse me. The city also expended a little over $500,000 for street and sidewalk projects, purchased vehicles of almost 70,000, and made improvements to parks and in the swimming pool of close to 85,000. Let's take a quick look at the long-term debt of the city. Long-term debt was just about 9 million at the close of the fiscal year. And it's broken down into these different categories, 232,000 for compensated absences, amounts that are owed to employees for paid time off, sick leave, et cetera. Almost 4 million in the net pension liability, just under 5 million for the 2 bonds payable. And overall, the city's long-term debt increased by almost 270,000. And that's a net amount, as the amounts due on the bonds decreased by 550,000 due to the regularly scheduled bond payments. However, the net pension liability increased by about 750,000. So when you net those two together, the overall long-term debt increased by about 270,000.
Ask a question.
Sure.
To help me understand the pension liability.
Yeah, so as you know, the city provides retirement benefits for the employees. And based upon market performance, the demographics of the city's workforce, the state that administers the pension hires an actuary to go through and crunch all those numbers and estimate what that liability will be. So each year a report is received from the state pension fund that tells us what that liability is, and we book the change into the financial statements. It wasn't, I think it was 2015 when we had to begin reporting this pension item as a liability. Prior to that, it wasn't even included in the financial statements. But that just reflects the change, and it goes up and down based on a number of factors. The estimates of the actuaries, stock market performance, as I said, demographics of the workforce, et cetera. It's really hard for the city to predict which direction this number is going to go each year.
So I guess help me understand what that almost $3.9 million in net pension liability means for the city. Is that something we're gonna have to come up with at some point, or is it just a number we don't have to worry about?
Well, it's not that you don't have to worry about it. However, each year the pension fund also gives the city a required amount that they have to put into the fund. And in theory, if you're making these required contributions each month and each year, there should be enough to fund that liability as employees retire. We just have to recognize that liability is out there and will be funded over time.
Is that liability is essentially is the unfunded part of our overall liability, correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
If you look at what all the contributions that we have made into the system, we have not contributed enough to fund all of the obligations we have for pensions.
That's correct. But again,
it is a problem.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Stossy?
Well, I guess what I'm left wondering is it something where it's based on how much we choose to contribute, or it's simply we just do what the state tells us and they do the math and they tell us how much short we are, but at the end of the day, we only have to contribute what they tell us?
It's closer to the second than the first. They give us a bill and we pay the bill every year for the amount that the state says we need to pay into these pension funds. The problem has been that the pension itself, the pension system, at least in my opinion, has not been very well managed. So the rates of return for a number of years were very, very low. And the amounts that they were having the cities pay were not enough to fund all of the pension obligations that that the cities had. There are a number of these funds, and this particular fund is not the worst fund. I think there are three major ones. Its unfunded liabilities are a problem, but it's not as much of a problem as, say, the police and fire pensions. Those public service pensions for them are even more underfunded. So that's something that the state is trying to grapple with now, and the cities are looking at potentially having to make higher contributions going forward so that we get that unfunded amount down to a manageable number.
Thank you.
That's very well described. Thank you, Mayor. And I've seen cities take three approaches to this. One approach is just to continue to make the minimum required payments. That is one option. A second option is some cities have budgeted to contribute more, a set amount more each year. And a third thing that some municipalities have done is they've actually issued debt to pay down their pension liability. I don't see that very often, but I have seen it in a couple of different instances.
That's usually with police retirement debt. There was a policy put in place last year that cities had to have a policy to pay off, to have a plan to pay off their police retirement debt. As the mayor was saying, this is the ASRS. It's not really that bad. And honestly, looking at this numbers, Councilmember Stossy, there's some cities in the state that have $1 billion in PRS liability. This one's pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah.
And also the amount of ASRS we have to pay every year, we match what the employees pay. And next year, it's actually going to come down some by 0.25% to a little over 12%. But that number is set by the state.
Well, that is also correct. The PSPRS system is much more greatly underfunded than the ASRS system. And the latter is the system that the city is participating in. That's correct. Let's take a quick look at the general fund finances, as it is the chief operating fund of the city. That top line there are the total assets in the general fund. The bottom line is the liabilities. So that second line that somewhat mirrors the asset line up toward the top of the graph is the equity. You can see some very positive trends here where assets are growing, liabilities are remaining relatively stable, and as a result, equity is also growing. Very positive trends here in the general fund. Here's the cash trend in the general fund. You can see the fund is reporting a healthy cash balance. And here are the revenues and expenditures in the general fund. You can see overall, they're very stable. And just as we'd expect to see it, there's a nice healthy margin between the revenues and expenditures. I think it's also important to note that in fiscal year 21, the general fund transferred about 1.7 million into the capital projects fund to help fund the city center project. Those were the highlights of what I wanted to share with you this evening. I just wanted to take a moment to to thank all those employees with the city that helped us with the audit. Paige, Matt, and all those in the finance department really went out of their way to assist us, and we appreciate that. And as a result of their dedication, we were able to complete the audit timely and effectively. And with that, I will be more than happy to answer any questions. Here's my contact information. If something comes to mind at a later date that you may want to run by me, I'm happy to answer questions at any time.
Any questions from council? Okay, thank you, Mr. Palmer, for your report. We're happy that our finance system is working properly and we made it through our audit once again. Congratulations to Ms. Peterson for leading our finance area. You're doing a wonderful job and we appreciate the service you provide to us and our residents as well as the others in your department.
Thank you,
With that, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just said thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. So with that, we'll go on to our report section, which the first report is from the Goodyear Fire Department. It says we have Chief Cole, but I know that's not the case because I can see that Chief Lee is here. So Chief, welcome. We're happy to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys as well. Okay, so for the month of November, actually 80 calls for service in the city of Litchfield Park. So one of our higher months that we've seen, and certainly we're trending to have a little bit of a higher calls for service during the fiscal year. So we'll continue to watch that. About 75 of those calls were EMS related, or about 94%. That's pretty standard for Litchfield Park. 11 of those calls were at La Loma and 15 at Las Cruces. So we are going to follow up with the Las Cruces team just to make sure that they are most efficiently using the 911 service for their residents. And then La Loma, they just had a busy month. You know, they all of those calls were within our standard for calling 911. So we do review those calls every month with them, and they are a very responsive leadership team over there. So other than that, I didn't see anything else that was outstanding for this month to discuss. So I'm available for any questions.
Questions from council? Don't see any questions. Chief Uzi, thank you for your service to our community, and please pass along our appreciation to the firemen in your department for their service.
I will. And Mr. Mayor, just on behalf of the city, thanks for all your support during Mayor Lord's time that she was in hospice. The other piece too, they're still planning her ceremony or her celebration of life. So it sounds like it would be at some point at the end of January, but we'll make sure that Matt has all that information as we get a specific date picked out.
Thank you. Mayor Lord was a very dear friend, and we miss her.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so this takes us then to the Avondale Police Department report. We have Chief Espinoza here. Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Before I give you our stats, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for the nice Christmas card to our staff and the goodies they wanted me to pass along. They really appreciate that. This month, the month of November, our staff took a total of 249 calls for service. Of those 249 calls for service, 147 were self-initiated calls for service for a total of 59%. In addition to that, we had a total of 12 flock alerts involving 5 vehicles. And what I mean by that is that each time that a vehicle comes through one of our intersections and the flock system picks it up, as that vehicle exits the city, that's another activation. 2 of the 5 vehicles account for 3 activations each. In addition to that, we were able to use the flock system to assist us with 2 investigations. One of them involved a theft of a golf cart, and the other one a theft of a purse out of the wigwam. And that investigation is active. However, we think that we're going to be able to make an arrest here soon, thanks to the flock system. At this time, I'll take any questions.
Questions from council? I don't see any. I'm curious. It looks like the number of traffic warnings has been coming down, but the number of traffic citations it has gone up, and I guess they kind of stabilized at around 33 or 34 per month. Do you hear anything from your officers about just the general level of compliance with our traffic laws in terms of stopping at the stop signs and speeding?
Mayor, we believe that our residents are now finding out that we're out and about. We did, however, see a recent increase in traffic violations on Old Litchfield Road. We're assuming that this has to do with the traffic on Litchfield Road, or the construction on Litchfield Road. We're addressing that, and in fact, we're going to be bringing one of our traffic units, one of our motors, to assist us, because we have seen an increase in traffic and traffic violations here in the last week or so.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions to the council? If not, Chief, thank you for your service to our community, and please thank the officers who patrol the streets. We appreciate their service as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
This takes us to our staff reports. First staff report is Finance, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Tonight I have our finance report through the end of November. So I'd like to share my screen and start with our sales tax. Okay, sales tax through the end of November, we had another good month. In all categories except construction, we were up 23% this November over last November. And then year to date, we're up 10%. Our construction sales tax this month was down 31% over last November. However, we're in total 60% over last year, and we're well above what we had budgeted. So doing really well in both categories. And on to the full report. We are 42% through the fiscal year. So if you look at our general fund revenues as a whole, they're at 45%. Every area is doing, is either at or above budget, except special events, but that's because those are just getting started. So this will catch up later. Fines are down a little bit, but like you had mentioned, there were a lot of warnings at the beginning of the year. Interest rates are still extremely low. And then miscellaneous will have one larger payment coming at the end of the year. So that should increase as the year moves on as well. Our general fund expenses by department, if you looked at the general fund in total, we're at 40%, so 6% under budget as a whole. We do have some departments that are over the 42%, but it's mostly because of some one-time larger expenses, so that should smooth out. Except the information technology department, I believe we will be asking you towards the end of the year if we can use some contingency budget due to that change in contractor we had right at the beginning of the year. And then the magistrate court, last month, you'll remember it was over budget considerably. However, the ordinance to start using the court enhancement funds went into effect. So I did move some expenses out of the general fund and into that fund. So that put them, they're at 43%, but I'm confident we'll be at or under budget by the end of the year. Our one-time revenues, which is our construction sales tax, we're at 1.2 million, and then our one-time ARPA funds, just over 1.1. And then we have spent just over 900,000 on capital projects, excluding Litchfield Square, because I report on that separately. That leaves our general fund ending fund balance just under 18 million at the end of November. I do have all of the rec services and special events detail. It's included in your packet. I won't go through all the detail unless there are questions at the end. We can go back up and look at the detail if anybody would like. And then our special revenue funds. Our HERF fund is just over budget. That should trend through the rest of the year because our population number was a little higher than the state had estimated. So our HERF revenue will be a little higher than we budgeted. So far, we've spent just over 55,000 in HERF funds, but there are some projects being discussed that should be brought to council. So that should be more HERF revenue should be spent. That leaves an ending fund balance of just under 1.3 million. In our Litchfield Square Capital Project Fund, we got our 15 million in bond proceeds, and through the end of November, we had spent just over 2.7, leaving 12.2 million in that fund. As the year goes along, I'm not planning to transfer any funds from the general fund until we've exhausted all of the bond proceeds. In the SLIDs, you can see the revenue has caught up now that property tax collections have begun. So there's an ending balance of just over 36,000. And in the court enhancement fund, revenue is just over 1,500, and I transferred $32 in expenses. So that left an ending fund balance of $151,000 in that fund. The ordinance does state we will keep a minimum balance at $50,000. So I will keep an eye on that to make sure we don't go below that minimum balance.
Ms. Peterson,
So
before
in
you
total,
go, before you go,
Uh-huh.
can you go back to the Litchfield Square?
Yes.
There's an amount that has to be paid. I think it's for utility, some of the utility costs, because we're prohibited from using I think we're prohibited from using the bond money. Maybe Matthew, can you speak to that? Is it Liberty Water that we have to spend general fund money on?
It's water and sewer, sir, because they're both private utilities. We can't use bond money on either one of those.
Okay, so have we not spent any of that yet? So it's not been, I'm assuming that's going to show up as one of these transfers from the general fund. So if we just not spent anything yet? Or is it just not showing up here?
We've most definitely spent money.
Yeah, and that is a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. So so the bond proceeds are actually in a trust account, and so we request draws from them. So even though we have 15 million available, when I requested the first bond draw, we excluded all of the water and sewer. So next month when I do this report, I will correct this too, so you can see what was spent on the utilities. I'm sorry, that's probably very confusing.
We'll see that as one of these transfers from the general fund, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
you're absolutely correct. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The general fund in total has a fund balance of just under 18 million. Our special revenues at 13.7, so grand total of 31.7 million at the end of November. And that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions from council? I don't see any. Thank you for your report. We appreciate the information, and you need to keep on making money for us. So go get some more money.
All right, I will do that.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Next item is the Litchfield Square update. Mr. Scouten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a quick report. As Matthew mentioned, the major work right now is in Litchfield Road. Aiken Gardner is working on the east half of the road at this point, and all the traffic, of course, has moved over to the west half. When they get that east half built, then they'll flip that so that all the traffic will be on the east side, and they'll be able to work on the west side, and then finally they'll split the traffic and build the center part of it. We're a little bit behind schedule on that because of APS. We've been waiting for them to get into the median and de-energize the existing streetlights so that we can remove them. There's also some existing underground feeder lines that they need to relocate, and we're hoping that they'll have that done here in the next 2 weeks. We're wrapping up the water system. We still got a little bit to put in, but we're basically done with it. As Councilwoman Donahue mentioned, the underground retention system is in place. It's now completely buried, and Aiken Gardner is working on connecting all of the storm drains to that. The storm drains are essentially complete. We're completing the phase 1 park plans, so those will be finished very quickly so Aiken Gardner can start doing their takeoffs on the first phase of the park. And the phase 2 paving plans for all the streets other than Litchfield Road and Village Parkway, those are at 60% complete. Just finished a review of those plans, and they're in good shape, and we'll be wrapping those up in the next couple of months here. And that's all I have, Mayor, unless there's any questions.
Questions from council? question, actually probably for the city manager. Where are we on negotiating the easements we need on from JDM along the west side of Litchfield Road?
We're still waiting on the quick claim deeds thrown Camelback. Try to do those at one time.
Trying to get both of them done?
Mhm.
And what's happened? So where are those at then? Quitclaim deeds, has Goodyear Farms indicated that they're going to contribute that property?
We have sent the quick claim deeds to Goodyear, but we haven't heard anything back from Goodyear. That's correct? We haven't heard anything back on those quick claim deeds, right?
Yes, that's correct. They've had it for about a week or so now. They were very appreciative of the additional information. So hopefully they'll be returning that to us pretty soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, sir. We'd like to do those as one deal if possible.
Okay, so long as it doesn't hold up construction of the roundabout.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anything else from council? If not, then we'll go on to the consent agenda, item 9. We have items A through F on the consent agenda. Is there any member of council that wants to take any item off of the consent agenda? Seeing no requests, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, item 9A through F?
So moved.
Okay, it was moved by Councilman Stossy, seconded by Councilman Romack. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Consent agenda is adopted as presented. Now we'll go into the business items. Item 10A, Jones Lang LaSalle contract for Litchfield Square marketing. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and council, you may remember, we've been talking with JLL for a while. JLL is a nationwide company. They're very well known. They market projects, they broker projects, build projects. Again, nationwide company, very well known. You may see the numbers they did in the council communication. Basically, we would like to hire JLL to do the marketing for Litchfield Square, to market any properties that we don't sell to local developers. They would market those properties. They would also work with us on brokerage if needed. So we went back and forth. We've had several meetings and they've met with the working group twice. They've met with me and the mayor and several other city employees several times to try to narrow this focus down to get it where we need to be. As you know, there's been a lot of work done on City Center over the years between the Rick Hill study, DLP, various documents, and those do make this process easier. Long story short, JLL is requesting $200,000 fee for the marketing of these properties and a 4% commission if we choose to use the brokerage services. In my opinion, I think it's time to bring JLL on board. They will help us sell these properties. They have the contacts, they know the people, and they just have those connections that city staff just don't have. We are a limited staff and can only do so much. And I think with JLL, we'll get a higher level of business here and really bring in the companies that it takes to make this project successful. With council's approval, we would request council staff direction to draft a contract between the city and JLL, and that contract would come to council in January for your review and consideration.
Yeah, are there any questions from council? Councilman Romack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matthew, do they express an optimism for marketing of this project, or are they reluctant, or what is their feeling or attitude toward it?
It's very good, sir. They think we have a huge opportunity here to get the right businesses here. An example of that, staff had projected these properties to sell for roughly $7.2 million for all parcels. JLL thinks these parcels will easily exceed 10 million. So they're excited to do this project. I think it's a huge opportunity in the western part of the United States, and especially in the Phoenix area. I think they'll do a good job for us.
What about then the RFQ that was sent out to and responded to by local contractor realtors?
Yes, sir. We're going to talk about that later on the agenda tonight. JLL is aware of that. So mayor and council will select one or more developers tonight to work with from the local RFQ. And then JLL would market the properties that are not selected through local developers. And they are aware of that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments on the JLL proposal? Vice Mayor Faith.
Thank you. Question, the 4% commission on the gross transaction value is, what if there's another broker involved? They're going to split that 4%? They're going to come back and try and get a percentage on top of the 4%?
We actually talked to JLL about that. And in these kinds of transactions, they'll be going to large developers, either regional or national developers. And in those cases, those developers will not be bringing in their own broker. So it would be unusual to see another broker representing someone who would be purchasing one of the parcels that's being sold through the JLL marketing process. If they do, if a broker comes, then JLL will require the developer to pay his own broker themselves. It will not come from the city.
Mayor, I believe Councilmember Claire had a question also, sir.
Are we happy with the answer? Do you have any follow-up, Mr. Vice Mayor?
No, that's fine. I'm still thinking.
All right, Councilman Claire.
The 4%, will that be on the initial stuff that we're working on right now? Will they get paid on that as well, since that's already stuff we're working on prior to their coming on board?
No, their contract would only cover the lots that are not included, not carved out for these local developers. You know, if that's one, or it may just be one lot, but whatever that is will not be part of the 4%.
And then secondary, so if we're at the 7.2 million that we're projecting, you know, that's 288,000 plus $200,000 initial fee. I would imagine people would want to, a lot of brokers would beg to get their hands into this project. Does that seem, are we comfortable with that price point?
Well, you know, we went out on RFQ, and JLL was really the only broker that was responsive to the RFQ. There will be significant costs involved with their putting together this national campaign. So, I mean, it's not going to be just a matter of them opening up their Rolodex and calling people. They're going to put together a formal presentation that will market this to these developers that they indicate, and whether that's true or false, they indicate that. And it looks like we have one of JLL's with us. Brian, are you here?
Yep. How are you guys?
Good. So maybe you can answer Councilman Claire's question about whether you're charging us a reasonable price.
Yeah, we obviously believe so. Pricing for these kind of projects are really market by market. I'll give you a couple of examples. We did a very similar exercise with the state of Louisiana. The client was Louisiana State University, and our fixed portion of that was about $425,000. And then we got a slightly smaller, but still, substantial success fee at the back end of that. So it was much more than this. They had a little bit more risk on the deal, a little bit longer to go than you guys do. You guys did a lot of good work in advance of this, which is one of the reasons why we're a little bit lower than we would typically be. The same week that we put this pricing in, I had a very similar exercise with the University of Wisconsin. We were at very similar with 325,000 fixed. Again, they had a little bit further to go. You guys have got a lot of the kind of the first steps out of the way. So, the work that your team did that's already been done in advance on this project lowered the cost. And then on the success fee, Brian quoted a lot of the other projects that he's done, taking the normal success fee on a property of this value and discounting it to reflect some of the pricing being done fixed up front. So we believe that it's aggressive and slightly under market.
Councilman Clare, you're muted, so if you're asking a question, we can't hear it.
Apologize, someone muted me. Is the 200,000, is that what we're calling the success fee?
200,000 is basically, it's milestone. So if at any point you stop, that stops. But it's basically to cover the costs and to write all the documents. I mean, there's a relatively extensive RFP process here. We do, we do things like manual. So for example, in the RFQ process, when you're selecting a developer, you would put in the RFQ what your priorities are for that developer. So you would want to say, tell us where you've done this before. Tell us the experience you have building this kind of development. Tell us about your financial capacity. And then we do a matrix where we rate those things. So for example, not everybody's financial capacity is the same. There may be a lot of people who have the ability to deliver, but other people might have, really, really outstanding cash in the bank with, good relationships with banks and all these different things. And so we would score those differently because, and I've seen this, when things hit the fan, it really helps to have a lot of money in the bank. So you want to give preference to folks with more money when you're qualifying developers. And that's only one small portion of what we look at. We look at experience developing in Arizona, experience, developing with you guys. And there's lots of other things we look at. And so we put a rating model together. And that rating model actually comes with kind of like you would read a menu. What is a 10? What is a 9? What is an 8? How do you define those things? And then we advise you on what scoring should be, how we would score it, what we would recommend, all these different things. So it's an extremely involved process, writing those documents, helping you guys work through those decisions, and then preparing and answering questions after the fact.
No, understanding that there's a process that's here, and that's going to be for any development that you have anywhere in what you're looking to do. My question is, real estate is a risk business. The fixed cost on the front side that we're putting up front seems to be 40% of the cost of the total project if you sell out at 100% at projection. So it just seems to be a strong amount of money up front. And if you don't perform, then you're still guaranteed 40% of the money.
I haven't done the math on what the percentage is. I don't know exactly where all those things, that kind of comes with what value we get for the city. So I'm not sure I would say it's 40%. What we looked at is in similar situations around the country where there's a lot of work that goes into this process. This is not selling a home, right? There are not template forms that we can fill out that that go into the MLS, and that's how everybody sees it, and all these various things. There's hundreds of hours that go into, and that's staff hours that go into preparing these documents, and that's part of why I think we're here, is that we're a little bit different, and we're gonna get you through this process in a way that we've done with other governments before. And so that's the rationale for how we structured our pricing.
Just so you know, the way I got the 40% is 4% of 7.2 million is 288,000, and you're asking for an additional 200,000. So just roughly the numbers are where they're at. I don't have a problem with you being compensated for what you're doing. I just don't like the concept of that amount of money being upfront at a fixed number. That's my personal feelings.
This is Brian Ackerman. Sorry, I was a few minutes late, but just on the question, I think Brian explained it. The beginning of this process is going to take months. A typical listing on a sale, which I'm in capital markets, so I typically just am brought in with a group like Brian to help facilitate the process here on the ground, boots on the ground. And then ultimately we sell the price we go out to try to get the highest and best price for the land. And I could give you, several examples without going into detail. And again, this money is not going just into my pocket, but we've closed deals for $5.5 million, that 5.5% fee. We've closed $10 million deals and this is all within the last 12 to 24 months, where we're getting a 4% fee. And that's on just a very typical process, a land sale that you send out to the market, you blast it off, we do a competitive process, we tell groups to submit their offers on the same day. And then we try to get those prices up. So everybody submits it, is $7 million. And our goal is to try to get that offer up to $7.5–8 million. And that entire process on a typical sale takes anywhere from 2 months, 3 months, 4 months max. So a lot of this process on the front end is again, and I think Brian did a good job of explaining some side how that process works. It's more of a fee based at the beginning, consulting, and then at the end it's a sale.
Councilman Romack.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. Both you Brians did a nice job. I would have a question about leverage. Do you anticipate any of this property being leveraged from the buyers? Or is this something that is typically paid out of loans, or is it cash out of pocket? So can you help me with that?
Yeah. So the answer is that it depends. The typical development process is they would put leverage on the property. That depends on a couple of things. First, it depends on the deal structure that you guys as the city ultimately select. There will very likely, I never want to say never, but I've probably only seen one development in my life that did not have debt funding the construction of the physical improvements. So buildings, any parking lots that need to be developed around those sorts of things, vertical improvements, so to speak, that will almost certainly have debt associated with it. The land itself can kind of go either way, in part because, like I said before, the transaction structure is not 100% solidified here. And what we've been instructed is to get some options for the city to review on that transaction structure. And so if somebody comes in and buys fee simple, it's likely that there will be some debt on that. If it is a ground lease, it's possible that there won't be, for two reasons. One is it's more of an ongoing payment. And so there's nothing for them really to capitalize to take debt out on. And the second thing is that there can sometimes be terms in ground leases that make it difficult to take debt out on specific parcels of land. And some of that can be about your own clauses that you might need to have from a legal perspective with your rules and regulations. So that's a long-winded way to say, I'm sorry for being long-winded, but that's a long-winded way to say probably, most likely on the physical assets, probably on the land.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that question, it's a good one. And like Brian said, there most likely will be debt associated with whoever buys this. And about 3 years ago, JLL purchased a company called HFF for $2.2 billion. And the reason for that purchase was for the debt platform was a very, very big reason. JLL originates more debt, 4 times more than our next closest competitor, which I believe is Newmark. And then after that, it's, I think, Cushman and then CBRE. I'm not sure the exact order. I just know that we are number one on the plan and in terms of originating debt. So when we're talking to developers, we're making sure that that's lined up for them. And a lot of the times we're the ones that are hand-holding them through the process to make sure that they're getting the best rate. Yep, I think you're on mute, Councilman.
Yeah. If I may, typically the land would be owned by the developer. The developer is going to bring it to the city for approvals and zoning and all of the process to build. I understand the debt on the vertical portion of it, but as far as debt on the land, now you're coming back to a city. And I think there are certain restrictions, actually I know there are certain restrictions that the city has in selling parcels over a certain number or dollar amount. And I think this is going to become a little bit more complicated than any of us would want. But, it's the world we have to live in. So I was just wondering if you guys have anticipated something like that, where a buyer comes in and wants to deal with the city, and the city makes it almost not impossible, it makes it difficult to deal with unless you go to a land lease, and then a land lease, now you have debt issues. And so I just want to be sure that we're all clear on how this is going to play out.
We have thought about that. There are two solutions. You named one of them, which is a ground lease. Ground leases for these types of developments are relatively common. It's not it actually, I had a developer once tell me that they liked ground leases because it was effectively the city financing their purchase of the land. And, after a certain period of time, that their debt partners don't really care if it's a 99-year ground lease or a fee simple acquisition. Their debt partners are relatively indifferent. So if you get a sophisticated developer, it can actually be good. Cities like it for a couple of reasons. One is you can exert more control. Second of all, you don't get an upfront payment. And I have a lot of governments tell me that they like the ongoing payments because, as my one client said, we're bad with money. It just goes into the fund and then it's gone. And they like the ongoing payments, for over a 99-year period. Those escalate. And like I said, you've got a little bit more control. So the ground lease is certainly a big piece of that. The second way that had been contemplated, and all of this has to get worked out, so this is just some very preliminary discussions, was to break the parcels into basically the parcel that would be developed individually for that building. So there would be a number of parcel sales. So essentially, if you've got 6 buildings that are going to be developed, you would have 6 individual parcel sales. So that reduces the number that any one individual parcel would garner in the market, kind of hopefully keeping below. I think you have a $1.5 million threshold before there starts to become some issues. So and that's just some very preliminary, and that's even trying to keep it out of that. But if you guys decided that you wanted to go through that process, that was what was right for you guys, then there's ways that we can go the other direction.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Mr. City Manager, you have a question?
I have a few comments. Councilor Romack, you asked about the election number, sir, about the 1.5. As Brian said, that's correct. So Mayor and Council, you may remember, if any of these properties sell for more than $1.5 million, that triggers an election. To be honest, I think we're going to fly all over that, especially if these parcels sell for $10 million or more. Staff is currently planning to have the approval of these land sales on the May 2022 election to do just that, so that if any of the parcels sell for more than 1.5, we're covered. JLL is planning on, if approved, to run the market on these 2 different ways. One would be to market the parcels individually. Another way, of course, would be to market them as one master developer to develop all the remaining parcels. I know there's some concerns there with council as far as a master developer land banking these properties. However, it's my understanding from JLL and conversations we've had in the working group that we could put in development agreement that any developer would have to have buildings going up within X amount of months, say 12 months, or otherwise the property reverts back to the city. So we could take care of the land banking clause. A few of the things I would say as far as the fee goes. So I think where JLL makes our money for us, one is in the land sales. I think the land will bring more money through JLL because they know the people to sell this market to get the right people here. And also the businesses long-term that come in here that ultimately make more money for the city. For example, just on the land sales alone, as I said, staff was thinking these properties would sell for $7.2 million. If these properties really do sell for $10 million, then right there, that's $2.8 million additionally we weren't planning for. As Councilman Claire said, they are going to get a fee of if it sells for $10 million, a $400,000 commission based on 4%, and also $200,000 in marketing for a total of $600,000. However, if they're making us an additional $2.8 million, we're paying them $600,000 total. We're still clearing $2.2 more than we thought we would. Again, that's saying if we can get $10 million. But I think JLL pays off for us long-term, again, in the properties who they sell for, how much money they bring, and more importantly, long-term in the businesses that they bring into the city and for our finances long-term.
Councilman Silsey.
Thank you. I just have a comment to make. I've been serving on the committee that's been working on this. And my own personal perspective, having served on the committee, is that we collectively as a city, and by that I include us as a council, us as a committee, and us as city staff, we're in over our heads trying to develop this thing by ourselves. And I would hold up as examples A and B that we on our own have gone out to the marketplace now twice to try to bring in developers. And we'll see, when we have our discussion later, how many viable developers we brought in. We'll debate that. But in our first attempt, we brought in 0. And I don't know how many we'll bring in this time, but I'm pretty confident we aren't going to sell the whole thing this time either. So I just think we're in way over our heads. And I think that our chances of having a high quality, successful Litchfield Square city center development are enhanced dramatically by bringing in professionals who do this for a living.
Any other comments or questions from council?
Yeah, here. I would agree with you, Tom and Ron. As you know, as a businessman, it takes money to make money. So, you got to spend a little on the front to make a lot on the back.
All right, is there a motion to direct staff to negotiate a contract with JLL for the purpose of marketing and sale of the parcels within Litchfield Square City Center?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second that motion.
Besides motions from Councilor Rostosi, seconded by Councilor Romack. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed to the motion, please signify. Okay, so we've got the motion carries 5-1 with Councilman Clare voting no. All right, we'll go on then to the next item, which is an RFQ timeline. Presenter is Mr. Scouten. Got to get off mute, Woody.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could share my screen, I'll go ahead and put that timeline up on the screen. So this is a timeline that came out of the process that we're in right now with the current RFQ for developers, and also elements that came out of our early 2020 process for trying to put one of the parcels out for bid. So I went back through those bid documents and came up with a timeline and with an understanding of what the process will be for a proposed developer project to get through the review and approval process. So, we've already gone through the RFQ process. Somewhere along the way, we need to be verifying any developer that we choose to work with, verifying their financial capacity for the project. Depending on what happens tonight, there would be notification tomorrow. And then we start a period of negotiation to reach a development agreement and bring it back to the council for approval. If a development agreement is negotiated and approved, that starts the process of signing and executing all of the documents that go along with that. However, if that negotiation leads to a sales price for the parcel that is over 1.5 million, then that triggers the election, which won't be held until May. So we're January, February, March. So we're probably about 2 months of delay, month and a half of delay in the process until it can go to the voters. And this whole process then kind of stops at that point until the voters do approve the sale. Then once the sale is approved, if we have to go through the election, then we open escrow. We hold a pre-application meeting with the developer to go through his project and to make sure that there's nothing that we see that would be a snag to getting the project through the design review board approvals and ultimately through the council. And what you see there on the right-hand side is just an estimate of how long these individual steps will take. Of course, it depends a lot on the developer and how quickly they want to move on the project, how quickly they can get their consultants to put forth plans that we can take through our review process. We expect that staff would review it a couple of times before it ends up in front of DRB. And I'm assuming that DRB will approve it when they first see it. Again, these are assumptions and estimates of timeframes. And then once the developer receives DRB approval, then we schedule it for council approval, which would be roughly 2 weeks after the DRB meeting. And then assuming council approves it, then we would close escrow, and the developer then starts submitting construction drawings. We go through review of the construction drawings, and eventually leads to a permit, construction permit being issued to the developer. That process, I think I estimated, was about 40 weeks or so, 42 weeks plus or minus. So you can see that it's going to take a while for these projects to start construction. And again, it depends greatly on how quickly the developer wants to move ahead with the project, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I'd like to point out, just to make sure the council understands, is that these time periods are estimates, as pointed out by Mr. Scouten. They may go, these steps could go faster or they could take longer. But these various steps will be part of the whole process of negotiating the development agreement, so that they are part of the overall agreement to keep the project moving, so that it doesn't end up stopping. So it's to try to make sure that the council has an opportunity to approve what project is going to be constructed, but at the same time that we do it in a timely manner, so that this doesn't stretch out too long. So are there any questions from council? Okay, I don't see any. Is there a motion to approve the general RFQ timeline as presented by the city engineer? So I have motion by Councilman Donahue. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Romack. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. So the general RFQ timeline is adopted. The next item is the RFQ for Litchfield Square Development. Mr. Williams.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
I believe we are out of order.
Did I miss something?
You're on item J.
I went to item C, request for qualifications. Is my
Have the old agenda.
oh, that's good. Let me see if I can get a new one.
Mayor, while you're doing that, sir, I would suggest that we move the RFQ items, sir, till after the executive session.
That would make sense.
While the mayor is doing that, thank you, Brian and Brian, for being on the call with us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Terry, you're saying that the agenda that we have online right this minute is not correct?
The online version is correct.
I may have picked up the original agenda.
but I don't see a K in there. I still see it
We don't have a K. It goes to J.
correct. So we just did I and we're on coming to J right now.
Yes, which formerly was item B.
So the item we covered on the RFQ timeline is now I.
Correct.
All right.
All right, now you've lost me too, because looking at this, I think the next time I would see should be adoption of resolution number 21505, Litchfield Square CFD election.
That is correct. That's item B on the correct agenda.
Okay, all right.
All right, I have a new playbook.
Should be item B under new business, sir.
All right, so we're going to go back to 10B, adoption of resolution 21-505 for the CFD election. Mr. Estes.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Again, as we discussed in the CFD board meeting earlier this evening, this is the formal resolution of the city, of the mayor and council, to delegate and appoint the authority to the city manager to cast the vote on behalf of the city in the election that was scheduled at the CFD board meeting for January 14th.
All right, any questions from council?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Romack. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is adopted. Next item is item 10C. A resolution 21-506 to authorize dissolution of the IDA, the IDA board.
Mayor and council, I'm going to defer to the city attorney to present this.
All right, Mayor and Council, and what this is it's a resolution to authorize and direct the board of the Industrial Development Authority, the IDA, to initiate and carry out the dissolution of the IDA. Under the statute, the board formally does the dissolution of the IDA, but because the IDA was formed as a result of a council action, we're taking the position that we want a council authorization to direct the board to be able to commence that process and dissolve the IDA.
The IDA was originally formed in Litchfield Park to be a potential assistance to the development of La Loma by Sun Health. Have you talked to Sun Health to confirm that they do not have any desire to use the IDA bond financing in their project?
I have not had any conversations with Sun Health on that.
We happen to have a Sun Health representative. I can see that he's here, Mr. Vanderveen. I don't know if he's muted and he's a truck right now, so I don't know if he can. Mr. Vanderveen, if you can hear me, can you come on for a minute? Looks like only the truck is here. So
Mayor, while waiting for Mr. Vanderveen, I can say that the last several years, there have been no reports from Sun Health. They have not provided any information to the board.
Yeah, we have not used, it has not been of interest to the Sun Health in the past, but that was the reason it was formed.
Yeah, and I think that was the reason for putting this forward for the dissolution, is because it is sat dormant, hasn't been used. And also the city has to maintain insurance to cover the board and a number of different things.
Yeah. Mr. Vanderveen, we're looking at dissolving the IDA board, which would end our ability to provide IDA funding for the development at Sun Health. That was originally, it was before your time, but it was originally.
Thank you.
I'm assuming now you may have been one of the helper bees in Sun Health, and we didn't see you, but it was put in place to help Sun Health if Sun Health wanted it as a potential financing mechanism to construct the project on the Loma campus. So in dissolving this, my only concern is just to make sure that you're aware we're dissolving it, and it is not part of any planning that you're doing.
Well, now I'm all interested and want to plan around it. But no, Mayor, without knowing the history and based on where we got our zoning case, I would say this is old. This is in our past. So I would not stand in the way of the city dissolving this. We're not currently looking at any of this in our current situation.
Okay, so is there a motion to adopt resolution 21-506 authorizing dissolution of the Industrial Development Authority Board?
Move.
Moved by Councilman Romack, seconded by Councilman Clare. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion is adopted. Next item is ordinance 21-252, tree preservation and protection. Ms. Roth.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This ordinance was introduced during the November 17th regular meeting. It is updating the city code, removing the language referring to the tree board. And the duties of the tree board have been transferred over to recreation and public grounds. If there's any questions, this would be the second reading and final adoption if council chooses.
Any questions from council? If not, is there a motion to adopt ordinance 21-252? Moved by Councilman Donahue, second by Councilman Clare. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion is adopted. Next item is discussion and possible action to introduce ordinance 21-253, which would de-annex a portion of Indian School Road right-of-way from the city of Litchfield Park so that the city of Avondale would be able to pursue annexation of Wigwam Creek South.
Mayor and Council, this is just the formal process that the city has to take to de-annex this strip of land in connection with the IGA, the intergovernmental agreement that the city has with Avondale to allow Avondale to try to annex in the Wigwam Creek South subdivision. So this is just a formality. We have to do this first so that there's continuity with regard to the property that Avondale is going to attempt to annex with the Wigwam Creek South annexation. If for some reason, pursuant to the IGA, if for some reason they are unsuccessful in doing that Wigwam Creek South annexation, then this strip of property would come back to the city.
Any questions from the city council? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. This strip looks like it's 33 feet wide. Is this asphalt, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, something we maintain? Does anybody know?
Woody, do you have any idea? I know you were involved when this was done previously.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Faith, I'm trying to recall, but basically, I think it's behind the curb, and I think it was it was in the right of way, but it was behind the curb, and basically, it's our strip that is blocking. So I think it's a 10-foot wide strip or 30-foot wide. But anyway, it's blocking Avondale's ability to annex past that strip into Wigwam Creek South. So we're basically opening the door, if you will, for them to annex through that area. I couldn't swear to you, but I'm pretty sure it's in the right of way, but it's probably behind the back of curb.
Well, does this open the door for, I mean, the way the strip annexation laws are set up, no city can jump over another city's strip annexed area and go inside and start annexing. So this is like a fence. Now that we're taking down the fence in this spot right here, are we putting any other property at risk of losing it?
The answer to that would be no, because they would have to jump across Camelback Road if they were going to try to annex to the north, and both Litchfield Park and Glendale have strips that run along the north side of Camelback Road and eventually up through Wigwam Creek North and over to El Mirage Road. So no, this doesn't open a door to annexation of any other properties.
My last question is, it appears that this is in front of the Albertsons Shopping Center. Is there any reason to service that shopping center that we'd want to keep it? Or at least keep part of it as opposed to getting rid of all of it? I mean, all Avondale needs is a foot to get through to get in there. Is there a reason to keep anything in front of the Albertsons Shopping Center?
Well, the Albertsons Shopping Center is already fully annexed into Litchfield Park. So what we're doing is we're cutting the strip where our annexation of the Albertsons Center ends. So the Albertsons Center would still remain in the city of Litchfield Park.
Also, Mr. Vice Mayor, that was part of the deal with Avondale, was what we would take and what they would take. For example, the deal with the post office in the 2012 agreement, you'll remember they were going to take the post office and they were also going to take Monument Point. And of course, this time that didn't happen because we want to keep Monument Point for obvious reasons. And they said they want to keep the post office. And of course, we made it very clear that we were not being willing to let go of any commercial property, whether it be Albertsons or Monument Point, that all this is doing so Avondale can effectively take Wigwam Creek South.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
If I may, we went through this a few years ago, and as I recall, we gave up the zoning or the strip annexation, but now it calls for a vote of the residents there to approve it. If they approve it, so be it, and that's the way. That's fine. If they were to not approve it, do we turn around and does it all fall back to Litchfield Park and the previous annexation lines, or is it gone? Is it going to be part of Avondale from here forward?
Councilmember Romack, sir, if Avondale fails to get the 51% of landowners required to annex Wigwam Creek South, then it would revert to us, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scouten, is there any reason why this strip that we're going to open up, that when we're going to open up the door, why don't we open the door up beginning on the east side of the Albertsons Shopping Square, as opposed to beginning at Dysart Road?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that's what we're doing. I think we're
that's what's
giving
on
up.
the drawing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have that in front of me.
Drawings, the way the drawing is drawn, it starts from the base of the center line, or maybe the eastern edge of Dysart, which is the western edge of that shopping center. It would seem to make sense, that we would open the door, but we open the door to the east of our line, to the east of the shopping center property.
City clerk or deputy city clerk, do you have that map?
I
That you
can share my screen.
This is a map. It looks like it's a map that's prepared by City of Avondale.
That's true, and it was done.
And you can see there's the strip, and that strip is starting was the southwest corner of section 23, which is Dysart Road.
It was stamped 9 years ago also. This is something that was done back when we were working on this years ago, and the HOA came to us and asked us to let Avondale annex it, and the HOA then couldn't get the votes after we went through all the work and effort.
Right. And Mayor, if I may, Mayor and Council, this is identical to what was done prior. We're using the same legal description, the same map, everything that was previously done under the same IGA. As you recall, just a couple months ago, we made some minor amendments to that IGA to take out the commercial properties, but this is what was called for in that IGA. And so instead of incurring additional engineering costs and fees, it did make sense to go and redo this and stamp it again today, because the engineer who stamped this, they're still valid, the stamp's still valid. The information of this strip hasn't changed. This was what was originally called for under the IGA. So that's why this is being brought back to council, because Avondale cannot start their annexation petition until this is done. And so we've got the initial reading, the second reading, and then the 30-day referendum period before they can even start.
I guess what I would say is that I'm willing to see this introduced, but I want you and the city manager to go back and make sure that having this start at the western edge of that development doesn't end up raising any questions whatsoever about where the lines would end up after Avondale, if Avondale is successful in getting Wigwam Creek South to vote for the annexation.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm looking at the Maricopa County Assessor's map, and the strip is located completely within the Indian School Road right-of-way. So eliminating the strip beginning at Dysart Road does not affect our annexation of the private property that is the Albertson Center.
All right, so what I'm asking is I want that reviewed to make certain that opinion is absolutely rock solid. And with that, I don't have any problem doing this. This is a good public policy decision for the residents of Wigwam Creek South. So I'm happy to see it happen. I just want to make sure that, my recollection of 9 years ago it's pretty foggy, but we probably had the same discussion 9 years ago to make sure that this strip had no impact whatsoever on the Albertson Center.
We'll be glad to verify that, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions from council? If not, is there a motion to introduce ordinance 21-253 for de-annexing a portion of the Indian School Road right away?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second by Councilman Romack. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. The ordinance is introduced. Next item is a discussion and possible action to introduce ordinance 21-254 governing short-term vacation rentals. Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. There are two main components to a potential short-term vacation rental ordinance. And the first part being the city would require short-term rental owners to register with the city. State statute does not allow us to charge a registration fee, but we are allowed to require registration. The reason we think it will be beneficial to have a registration list is, one, to ensure that we're collecting the sales tax, the appropriate sales tax from the short-term rental owners. And then it also gives us emergency contact information in case there is an emergency at one of these short-term rental properties. We could provide that information to law enforcement. The second component of this would be to enact a set of rules that would basically prohibit any non-residential use, such as holding any special events that would require a specific license, or operating any type of retail business, restaurants, housing sex offenders, operating or maintaining a sober living home, selling illegal drugs, liquor, pornography, operating any type of adult-oriented business, or just any other uses that are prohibited in state statute. This ordinance would include penalties if somebody did violate any of those rules, with the first offense being $500. The second offense on the property within a 2-year period would be $1,000. And then a third offense within 24 months could be $1,500 per offense. And then after that, if somebody actually did commit 3 or more within a 24-month period, we could deem them a habitual offender, which they could be found guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor and assessed a fine of at least $500, but not more than $2,500. And they could also be put in prison for a period not to exceed 6 months. And so that is the two main components of this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions from council? Councilman Donahue.
So Paige, do we currently have absolutely no rules? We have no licensing, we have 0. I don't know.
That is correct. We currently don't have anything to regulate short-term rentals other than what is already in city code, but there's nothing specific to short-term vacation rentals.
So nobody has registered, so we don't know, other than some of us might know people that have places that they rent, but most of them are just dealing with the vacation rental companies, I guess.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, a number of years back, the legislature, with the approval of the governor and his encouragement, took away the city's rights to regulate vacation rentals in any way, shape, or form, no matter how bad they were. And some of the cities are having some significant problems. Recent times, they've given us a little bit of power back, which is what this is about. Paige, do you have, and so that we're not creating criminals out of our landowners, how are we going to go about and get notice out to everyone that we've adopted this, if it gets adopted?
So Matthew and I talked about this, and our initial approach would be through social media, possibly newspaper ads, just try to reach out to them ourselves. If we find that that's not effective, there are companies out there that do this for a living, and they scour your cities and the cities and towns and find all of the short-term vacation rentals in your city. So that could be another option if doing it ourselves isn't effective.
Do we still have a sales tax auditor? We could just tell him, go do this?
Yes, we do have a sales tax auditor. I would need to talk to him to find out what tools he has available to him to find the short-term rental owners. But yes, we do still have him on contract.
Councilman Donahue.
I would think that you could certainly send the information to vacation VRBO and those that are most popular and ask them to, I mean, they're not going to give us their names, but ask them to submit it as well. Because I doubt that many of our vacation rental people are doing it word of mouth without a group. So that might be beneficial. I don't know.
We can probably just go online and look online and we'll see everybody who wants to rent their places. It's not hard to find them. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to introduce ordinance 21-254 concerning short-term rental, vacation rentals?
So moved.
Second by Councilman Donahue. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ordinance is introduced. Next item is an annual service contract with Anderson Construction Services LLC. Mr. Scouten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Randy Anderson of Anderson Construction Inspection has been working with me and the city for about the last 10 years through my company when I was the consulting city engineer, and then through EPS Group once I went to work for them. EPS has told me that they no longer want to provide his services as a pass-through. The original agreement was that they would not be allowed to mark up his costs, and I think they're just getting tired of not being able to make money on that. I talked to both EPS and Randy Anderson, and they're both open to having Anderson Construction Inspection contract directly with the city. In the contract that is in your packet, his hourly rate would be the same as we're paying now, $50 per hour, along with mileage for traveling to and from projects. This is a very similar contract to what he currently has with the town of Wickenburg. And I talked with Public Services Director there, Matt Egan, and he's very happy with the relationship that they have with Randy. And of course, I think Randy's one of the best inspectors I've ever seen. And he's very familiar with the city and has a proven track record of providing reliable and high quality inspection services for the city for at least 10 years. If we were to go to one of our on-call consultants and ask them to provide us with a construction inspector, it would cost us at least $100 an hour. So this is a good deal for the city, and we're able to keep an inspector who's familiar with our standards and requirements, especially working with Liberty Utilities. He does a great job of that. So I'm recommending approval of this contract this evening. Thank you.
Councilman Romack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke with Mary Dixon about this very thing. It's been a few weeks ago, but she was quite encouraging and said that the relationship that they all enjoy is very productive, and he would be a good replacement for her.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Vice Mayor?
This is to our city attorney. We have a contract with EPS. Do we need to get something in writing from them consenting to us going around them and not through them now for this service?
Not necessarily if it was just a pass-through on that contract. I can take a look at that contract and get back with you and let you know. I didn't review that contract in connection with this agenda item.
Yeah, all right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve an annual service contract with Anderson Construction Services LLC, subject to a review by the city attorney to make sure that notices and consents are in place if needed from our current city engineer contract? Is there a second? Second by Vice Mayor Faith. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next item is the approval of an opioid settlement agreements. Mr. Estes.
Mayor and Council, this is the second and final part of the resolution of agreeing to the two settlement agreements in the national litigation cases for the opioid epidemic. The council will recall the council approved the one Arizona agreement, which was the agreement that established the proportional share throughout the state of what the cities and towns and counties would get from the overall settlement that the state gets out of this national settlement. It is anticipated that the state anticipates getting $549 million out of the national settlements out of those two cases. We don't have firm numbers on that right now because the final numbers of the national settlements is going to be dictated by a critical mass of all the municipalities and counties throughout the entire country signing off on these agreements. And there'll likely be some holdouts and things, but it's anticipated that that's going to go through. So we're basing everything off of an anticipated amount of $549 million to the state of Arizona. And as these agreements provide, that's not a lump sum payment. These agreements provide, for example, the distributor settlement agreement, which provides for $21 billion, the vast majority of the settlement amount, to be paid out over a period of 18 years. And then the Janssen, which is the Johnson & Johnson company, to be paid out over a period of 9 years, but with a significant portion of that front end loaded. So that's what these agreements are trying to do, is trying to get as much of that settlement paid out up front. So what we anticipate is that once a year on an annual basis, the city is going to receive a payment for a total amount over the years of approximately $56,000 to be used. And these funds are restricted. They can only be used for those items as described in the One Arizona agreement, which are, education, programs to combat opioid, purchase of Narcan, training for officers, different things like that. And again, essentially, these are contracts of adhesion, take it or leave it. If we don't agree to these settlement agreements, the city doesn't get anything from the settlement funds.
All right, any questions from council? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Presuming that we pass this tonight, this sounds like it ought to be something maybe that's kind of a separate line item in our yearly give money to nonprofits or something, so that we can find a nonprofit that addresses these issues here and that money can go to them.
And that's the council's purview as to how to allocate these funds once they come in within the guidelines that have been established. But yes, they can be used to be provided to organizations, nonprofits, what have you, that help provide treatment or combat opioid. And then what will happen is these funds they'll be given their own separate accounting number to be tracked, because there will be some minor reporting requirements for the city just to show that we're using these in accordance with the limited restriction they have.
All right, any other questions or comments from council? If not, is there a motion to approve the two opioid settlement agreements related to distributor and Janssen litigation? Moved by Councilman Donahue. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Romack. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next item is the approval of the RFQ timeline, which we already did because we're so efficient. So we go to the final item of business, which was request for qualifications for the Litchfield Square development. This is an item that I think we had planned to go into executive session for discussion and advice of council. Executive session under I guess under B,
Yes.
for discussion with designated representatives of the city in order to consider its position. So is there a motion to enter into executive session under item 11B? Moved by Councilman Donahue. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Clare. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're going to go into executive session.
Excuse me, Mayor, if you'll give me just a minute, put people in the waiting room and to stop recording.
Yeah, just a second, though. I want to make a statement before we go into executive session, and that is that the council will go into executive session, and then when it comes out of executive session, it still has item 10J, business item 10J to act upon. So there will be a meeting. The meeting will continue once we come out of executive session. Now, get us segregated.
Terry, I would like to keep Woody and Paige in the executive session, please.
While she's doing that, I'm going to get some more water.
Me too.
Terry, it's not letting me disconnect. I think you need to make me host again and then I can give it back to you.
I've made you host again, Mayor.
All right, so we're reconvening the meeting of the city council. We are now on item 10J, which is possible action to direct staff to begin negotiation for development of a parcel in Litchfield Square with one or more of the developers who responded to our request for qualifications. Is there a motion? Is there a motion to negotiate with Heritage Partners in relationship to the response that they made to the RFQ, and to thank the other responders for their response and remind them that there may be additional opportunities in the future as this process moves forward? Looks like it's moved by Councilman Donahue, yes. Seconded by Councilman Romack. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries, and staff will follow. We'll follow that direction from council. That is it for business. So, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilman Romack, seconded by Councilman Clare, I hope. Yes? Okay. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Yes. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, council, for a relatively long meeting.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and happy Christmas, Merry Christmas.
We got a lot accomplished tonight. I also want to wish everybody in the council Merry Christmas. Hopefully you and your families will enjoy the holidays. And I would encourage you, if you have time, to come out to the Patriot All-American. It's a very, very cool event. The opening ceremonies is a very moving experience when you realize that each of those golfers has a golf bag with the name of one of our fallen heroes on that bag. And the bag is going to be carried around the tournament and then auctioned off to benefit Folds of Honor after the tournament. So I would encourage you to come out and participate in that tournament. Thank you and good evening.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you, everyone.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.